So the first thing I wanted to mention was Project Veritas did another leak. They mentioned yesterday they were going to do another leak on CNN. Previously, they'd shown that he admitted that CNN was just propaganda, which not great for CNN to have that public. They hadn't said anything yet, which is interesting as well, because this was like the number one story that was trending. You saw Fox News covered it majorly, of course, because it's their competitor. And they've released a second part. I assume they have more parts to come out. In fact, there is a third part at least, which he says. So the second part here, what was interesting is that they actually managed to find out how Project Veritas does this as well. Because you notice it's always a nice young girl who seems to get this out of people. And they mentioned apparently she found him on Tinder. So literally...
he thought he was getting some, and James O'Keefe turns up. Like To Catch a Predator style.
I'm assuming she worked with Project Veritas, had the camera, but the Daily Mail reported that they met on Tinder. Like, she found him on Tinder, and then, let's meet up, and then just recorded him.
So he was unironically there on a date.
Yeah, that seems to be the case. And then eventually James O'Keefe interferes, and is like, hey, why don't you take a seat? So anyway... So
before we go on, I'm not surprised in any way, shape, or form that they haven't addressed this. I mean, what are they going to say? Hi, our technical director said, we're a bunch of propagandists and we are the ones responsible for getting Trump out. What do you say to that? Like, what's the response? Well,
there's two moral responses. You could just say, all right, we're a partisan outlet, blah, 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 and we've made that clear and try and, pretend that you've always made it clear, which you clearly haven't.
Yeah, they'll destroy the reputation as if it's any good anyway.
But, I mean, that's one damage control method. Yeah. I mean, but saying nothing, I mean, I don't know if that's a correct method either. No. But anyway, I just wanted to show this meme because I saw it bumping around, but it turns out this is entirely true. This is entirely how Project Veritas gets you. 2 or 3 drinks at the bar and you're done. Anyway, so one of the other things we mentioned is yesterday the chap who's been is it catfished? Is that the right term for this?
Yeah, I think so.
So he mentioned that they ran a smear campaign against someone called Matt Gaetz, a Republican. We had no idea who he is, nothing to do with anything. But he was being unjustly attacked, in the words of the CNN director, because he's a Republican and that's a threat to the Democrats.
And he's a very hardcore Republican, apparently.
Well, from the perspective of a Democrat, I mean, anything actually conservative is hardcore Republican, right? So him being in opposition to their worldview was enough for them to be like, right, we have to kill him because our opposition used to be entirely rhinos. And this is how they thought patrol conservative movements.
But the allegation, really, from people who have been watching the podcast and leaving us comments to tell us about this, who have been following the Matt Gaetz case, have said basically he's an effective conservative. He can put the Republican case forward stridently and in direct opposition to the left-wing case in order to refute it, and therefore they're screaming, pulling their hair out and be like, right, we've got to get rid of this guy.
So that's...
Which explains why Politico described Matt Gaetz's victim as, quote, a former minor, as in formerly a child. But I mean, apparently they went on some cruise or something and she was 18 when she went. So it's like, right, so she was an adult when she was in contact with him.
But she previously had been a child.
She had previously been a child.
Right.
Matt Gaetz, confirmed villain.
Yeah, that's a pretty weird accusation.
Aren't you like former child labour then, by that standard?
I suppose so, yeah, I am.
I mean, I am as well, I guess. But
well, you're
who isn't?
You're a former child boss, I suppose.
I suppose so, yeah. God.
Anyway, so, I mean, we don't know that much about the guy, but that seems to be...
No, but their story seems to be ridiculous.
Yeah, it does seem
care.
to be nonsense. Yeah. But he has made a response to this, so we can get the next link up, which is just him. So there's some CNN journo here following him, trying to ask him questions, not getting anything, as typical. Mm-hmm. And then in response, you can see Matt Gaetz above here just responds with, "You refuse to answer my questions about Project Veritas video, wherein your colleague details your network's plot to attack me because I'm effective at blocking the Democrat agenda. #expose CNN."
That's excellent. Now that shows what the value of Project Veritas really is. Because when the media are coming up and like, oh, have you got anything to say about this thing? So, well, have you got anything to say about admitting to be propagandists? And
what are they going to do?
Exactly. Then you've disarmed them and you're pushing them back. You're finally going on the attack. This is excellent. This is what Republicans need to do.
Yeah. And it's not just that they're a bit biased or something. They have openly admitted here they're going after him unjustly because they hate him because his politics is wrong. Because
they work for the Democrats.
Yeah, that's their viewpoint. I mean, they're saying this, so it's good to see Matt Gaetz pushing back on that. So good for him because he also got a lot of likes out of this and a lot of support because I mean, it looks open shut. I mean, he's caught on camera saying we unjustly go after these guys.
He gave us a full admission. I don't know what more we need.
Yeah, so let's go on with the new footage. So clip 1 is just them talking about the COVID death toll. So you'll remember CNN throughout Trump's presidency.
They had a counter.
The counter of how many are dead, and him talking about that this is just propaganda, which, surprise, let's play.
We know.
It's fear. Like, fear really drives numbers. It does, you know? The happiest days in news, people, I would imagine, turn it off, and then when they go with the family, they don't stay glued to it, unless there's something that's uniting them, like the moon landing or something like that. Fear is the thing that keeps you tuned in, I imagine. What's the scariest thing there?
You know, sad news doesn't do well with ratings. You know, like if you can get someone impassioned, that does really well with ratings. Sad news back to back to back doesn't do really well unless it affects them directly. COVID, gangbusters with ratings, right? Which is why we constantly have the death toll on the side, which I have a major problem with, that we're tallying how many people die every day. Because I've even looked at it and be like, let's make it higher. Like, why isn't it high enough, today? Like, it would make our point better if it was higher. And I'm like, what am I rallying for? That's a problem.
Yeah.
That we're doing that,
Well, I mean, it helps with ratings.
Of course, yeah, but I would expect. I have a job. Sure, like I'm happy about that, but I don't know.
Who gets to decide how long that stays on, or
head of the network? I've been in the room many a times where my director tells me take it down, and I take it down, and then we get a phone call, the bat phone rings in the back, literally a red phone, the special red phone rings.
Yeah.
And they pick it up, and this producer picks it up, and you're mop, 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 mop. And every so often they put it on speaker, and it's like the head of the network being like, there's nothing that you're doing right now that makes me want to stick. Put the numbers back up, because that's the most enticing thing that we had. So put it back up. So things like that are constantly talked about.
It's most likely a Jeff Zucker call. If Jeff Zucker, the head of our CNN, he makes the call, someone is that the head of the network with the red bat phone? Yeah. No, yeah.
That's wild. That is a wild series of revelations. We are literally fearmongers who wish to emotionally incite the public so they stay glued to our networks, so we make money, and that's literally what we're paid to do. And if we're not doing it effectively enough, Jeff Zucker has a bat phone, a red emergency phone that he rings up and yells down at the producer saying, no, make it scarier.
Yep.
That is, I mean, the most uncharitable interpretations of media is always essentially something like that. It's always like, oh yeah, but
that's the mythos of how bad they can be.
Yeah.
And they're just saying, yes, we are that.
We are exactly that.
One of the things I find interesting about that admission as well is the idea that CNN's really, really boring. It's
Well,
just
yeah.
awful, to the point that the head's like, yeah, at least put the numbers up so something interesting's happening, because the rest of what we produce is just trash.
But the fact that all of the incentives are sat here for him to sit there going, God, I wish those COVID deaths would go up. Well, and then he's even like, what am I doing? So yeah, what are you doing?
I'm literally the meme out of those TV shows where it's like, you had the headline. What's that show where he puts the glasses on? It just says fear, be afraid.
CNN,
CNN,
They Live.
Yeah,
The
CNN
movie. Have
are
you not
literally
seen
saying
it?
we are that.
I'll say you got to watch They Live, man. It's
It's
great.
the stupid movies I gotta watch. But this is just an example if we get the so much up, just to demonstrate what we're talking about in case people aren't American or haven't seen this.
Yeah.
So you can see on the side there's Trump giving some speech or another, and then they just put the death toll up there to be like, look how many people are dead, look how many cases there are. And one of the things you'll notice is there's no context.
Yeah.
Total number of cases, total number of deaths. Well, what does that mean at all? How on earth am I meant to understand these numbers?
Why not just have a
Especially-
rolling death counter anyway?
But just also, how many have recovered? How many are today?
We don't need to know that.
So on and so forth. There's nothing there. I mean, even in the UK, I think it's like a Telegraph, or it doesn't really do this because they're considered more conservative, whereas the Guardian, being left-wing, pushes the same thing. They have the everyday front page, here's the numbers. But at least for them, they provide the context of, here's the graph of where it's going, here's how bad it is, blah, blah, blah. CNN didn't even do that. They just showed you 1 million people with cases, 100,000 dead. It's like, with no context.
Left-wing media, we're here to fearmonger.
Yeah, and he gets asked about exactly this point. But why don't you show the number who've recovered, or at least try and provide some context?
Balance it out.
And his response is, "Well, that's not good for CNN," which is just another open admission.
Probably true. I mean,
Let's play the next clip in which he says exactly this.
But why don't you guys at CNN show the recovery rates on the death tolls at least?
Recovery rates.
who's had it and then
Recovered.
Because that's not scary. I would imagine that's why they don't do it. Yeah.
That's what I figured.
If it bleeds, it leads. Yeah.
If it bleeds, it leads.
Yep.
I like that.
I think no one ever says those things out loud, but it's obvious based on like the amount of stories that we do.
So just, we don't provide that context because it wouldn't help our propaganda purposes. Like, we are here to say that the president has failed and blah, blah, blah. And if we provide the data that shows that it's, this number of people have recovered or blah, 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 or any of the context, then that wouldn't really work for us, so we're not interested. And one of the things that's interesting about this is it goes into a story that was during Trump's presidency, after Trump's presidency, in which there was this horrible rumor that the folks at CNN were being, deceitful. And after Biden had got in, they suddenly got rid of the death tracker all the time because people weren't noticing as much. And this is some article like fact check. Did CNN remove the tracker? And they're like, no, of course not. They still kept it there. Lying right wing yet again. And the lying right wing, as they list, is people like Ted Cruz. So we can go to Ted Cruz, in which he's trying to point this out. He's like, weird. Miraculously, COVID is cured. A very instant, the networks called the race for Biden. The number of dead, that little tracker there, that graphic, is suddenly gone. And people responded by being, haha, Ted Cruz, you're such a liar. Namely, Oliver Darcy, if we can get him up, in which he's saying that this is false. What you are tweeting is false. CNN has, for a while now, used the COVID tracker when discussing, wait for it, COVID. Bull. We know this is bull. We've got an admission now that it is not, no, we only took it away and we have it on just COVID stories now. Like, no, we have an admission from your technical director that, no, we use this as a propaganda method to try and harm the president.
Yeah.
This is not some...
But this was up just during their general coverage. It wasn't because just on the COVID.
Zucker would call the phone and say, this is boring, put the numbers up.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that anything on the screen had anything to do with COVID. Put the numbers up because it hurts the president. Like, that's what we want. Don't provide any context because that would help the president. People would think that it's not as bad as it is. And this is why you get such misinformation in the public. I mean, we've done this before when you get the graphs of how old people think the average people die. What's the percentage chance of death per decade? And people just get everything wrong.
The Democrat voters happen to think that it's something like 50% death rate and things like this. It's like, what are you talking about?
The only way you could get that opinion is if people are just actively misleading you.
Yeah.
Like CNN, who just openly admit this. There's also a tweet below this in which Oliver Darcy tries to mock Ted Cruz, saying, note how Ted Cruz should know by now that this is false, and yet his tweet remains up. Well, Oliver Darcy, now that we know that you are literally treating BS and you knew it, why are your tweets still up? Come on, get rid of them, correct them, put some context there, do a little fact check. Yeah, no, not going to happen. Nope. So he also goes on to say in the clip in secret video in which he says that there's no such thing as unbiased news. And this is, I don't know, it's presented as Project Veritas as a gotcha. I don't really get it as a gotcha. Because, there is no such thing as unbiased news, in my opinion.
It's only because they try to frame themselves as being the neutral, centrist, objective...
CNN does.
News source, and they're not.
And that's of note, I would say, but it's, I think our audience sort of...
I mean, generally, whenever academics do any kind of studies on media and media bias, CNN is almost always categorized as left-wing, partisan.
Yeah. And yet they have this opinion that, no, we're centrist, just the facts.
Yeah. No, you are left-wing partisans. That's okay. Well, it's not okay, but it's not unusual that there are left-wing partisans in the media. It's pretty unremarkable.
That's why they keep getting mocked. They have that advert back in the day of, this is an apple. People might say that it's an orange, but no, it's an apple, blah, blah, blah. And now it's like, let's talk about transgenderism. People just scream it's a woman. I wonder what happens then, CNN. It's become an orange, isn't it?
An apple is any fruit that identifies as an apple.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into it. But
this pantomime horse is a horse.
The next clip we have is him saying something that I wondered for a while. So you might notice that some of your favorite commenters, regardless of who they are, will go on TV once, and then they're never invited back. They don't turn up. Whereas there are certain people who are just awful, and yet keep getting invited on mainstream TV in the UK, US, internationally, and they just keep coming back, and you wonder, who's booking these people? Why would they book them? It's because they're midwits. It's because they're morons. That's why they keep getting booked. And your favourite people don't keep getting booked. And he admits this. Let's play.
You ever watch... We have to sit down and watch it together for me to point out some things. Listen to the way they ask questions. Because they're not actually asking questions. Any reporter on CNN.
Okay.
What they're actually doing is they're telling the person what to say. It's an art form in it.
What's it?
there's an art form to it, but it would be like the accident that you just saw, right? Like one of the reporters would be like, so that that man clearly went through the intersection, slamming into this car or whatever it was, and it really is unfortunate that our infrastructure of traffic lights and whatnot is falling apart in the city. How do you feel about the traffic lights and the infrastructure and whatnot? We've led them to talk about how we want them to talk about it. It's always like leading them in a direction before they even open their mouth. And the only people that we let on the air, for the most part, are people that have a proven track record of taking the bait.
Amazing, right?
Yeah.
And this is such a dunk internationally on just the people who keep appearing on mainstream media. My most favorite being here, I just typed in some of the people who people complain about. So Owen Jones, Ash Sharker, and Femi, for example, keep getting invited on TV shows that are mainstream all the time. I mean, even when they're extremely radical. I mean, Ash Sharker being the literal communist here, Owen Jones being a hardcore socialist and whatnot. And yet they just get invited on as if this is normal and everything. And this is why. Because they are midwits. They don't have anything clever. They will fall for the bait.
They will take the leading question and follow where it has been pointed.
Yeah, whereas many of, my personal favourites, so I mean, like Milo, for example, when he used to go on media, he would go on there once and then disappear. And you, for example, I must say, like, you go on there a couple of times and then, no more callbacks, not interested. I mean, Jordan Peterson as well, I know he's done loads of them, but how he came over, he did Kathy Griffin and whatnot, and then they were just like, let's not invite him back. Yeah. Let's move on. Let's never talk to that man again, because he utterly destroys us. And why you get people like Richard Spencer who get invited on CNN regularly. That's
CNN contributor Richard Spencer.
Like CNN are literally saying he's a dumbass that we keep inviting on because he takes the bait. And the same with all the leftists they have on all the time. I mean, they are literally insulting your intelligence when they have repeat gigs for you. I mean, amazing. It's just, I can't get over how they're just accepting that. But the last thing he mentions here, James O'Keefe, he says that there's a part 3 will be coming out, I assume, today, in which he says it will be, quote, CNN's roadmap to reality of what they want you to believe. So him laying that out, which I look forward to seeing, and I'm sure we'll cover it. If it's amazing, I imagine it will be. And again, I mean, God bless James O'Keefe from Project Veritas, doing the Lord's work of actually getting these people to expose themselves in public.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. And one thing I find really amusing about it is just how open and blabby they are when they think they're on the stage. Because the thing is, there have been lots of Project Veritas stings continually rising up the ranks. So is it next going to be Jeff Zucker, who sat down on a Tinder date and going like, yeah, well, I'm actually a Machiavellian genius who's puppeteering America into a giant civil war. Isn't that amusing? I mean, like, nothing will happen.
I'll let BLM kill 1,000 children before I let CNN die.
Exactly.
Like, is that going to be his position?
But that's the thing. Like, he's just so open. They're just so open about the things that they're saying. It's like, right, okay, amazing. How many times do you guys have to be caught on camera and exposed by Project Veritas before you're like, look, don't talk to anyone. Just do not talk to anyone about any of this because we look terrible. Yeah. And it's probably James O'Keefe in a mask. If you enjoyed this segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can watch the full broadcast live every weekday at 1 p.m. UK time on lotuseaters.com.